I'm Blam Blam Trucker number 1, Bees. That's Blam Blam Trucker number 2, Buse. That's right, I'm leading you in today to talk to you about Everquest versus City of Heroes and pulling in MMOs. And the reason why we chose these two is not only are both of us familiar with both of these MMOs, both of us have been pullers in both of these MMOs. And I gotta tell you, the way City of Heroes plays right now versus the way Everquest pulls right now, they're pretty much at opposite ends of the spectrum. So Everquest is the MMO, especially classic Everquest on your, time-locked progression servers, one of which should be new one should be coming out in May. They should be making the announcement in April, which is when this video should drop. Today we're recording this on one of the last days of March. So it should drop at the beginning of April, but sometime in April they make the announcement for what is going to be coming out for the rule set for the new time lock progression server, which I usually play on. I may not this year, but I usually play the first couple of months. I really love Classic Everquest, so we're going to be comparing Classic Everquest to City of Heroes Homecoming, and they are on opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, I can agree that they are that they are on different ends of it. And a lot of that has to do with class composition and what the individual classes do, and also how
Group size.
Literally how group size, class composition, how the AI and enemies work, really how defensive skills and such work, how damage works, because realistically, City of Heroes, you can pull a whole lot more stuff in anyways, regardless, because a good blaster is going to be a good blaster or sentinel or whatever can one-shot kill some of the stuff just coming in for
and
stuff.
The AoE is insane.
And the AoEs are insane, and that's for stuff around your level.
And the control is insane.
Yes. With EQ, most of the guys, you can't... The reason you need a group in EQ a lot of times is because, and while it's same in City of Heroes, it's different because with a group, the whole is kind of greater than the sum of your parts. However,
synergy.
Yeah. But in City of Heroes, there are some classes that literally can just solo through. It might take you a long time, but you can solo through even at, +4 or whatever. Whereas with Everquest, I have died many times, or come close to dying, with my paladin who could heal himself, who was in decently top raid gear.
Mm-hmm.
And just barely surviving a blue con, which a blue con is something that is lower level than you. And we're not talking like hard enemies, but for soloing one-on-one and me hitting it as hard as I can, blowing all my cooldowns, my life is going heal, and I live.
So, classic Everquest, not necessarily modern Everquest, but classic Everquest was designed to emulate the play of Dungeons and Dragons in the time period it came out in 1999. So right around the time that Dungeons and Dragons 3.0 was being released, which was 98, and it was still emulating the same style of combat as previous iterations of Dungeons and Dragons. I don't find it to be the same today with D&D 5.0, but your mileage may vary. Everquest was specifically designed where you take a group to fight one monster at a time. So you get 6 people together, and that's 8. So that would be 6. Haha! I can count! You get 6 people together to fight one monster at a time. So control is a very important element, and pulling is a very important element, because there's usually a group of 2 or 3 monsters, and if one of them sees one of their buddies being attacked, they'll come into the fray too. So pulling in EverQuest is a lot about, in classic EverQuest, is a lot about bringing 1 to 2 mobs, 3 maybe, and it is a job in and of itself inside the group, being able to pull well. In City of Heroes today, modern City of Heroes, you can, with the incarnate ability system and the sets and that was originally what City of Heroes was designed to be, but where we are in Homecoming, the legal server, which I'm still playing on, by the way, on Reunion server, you can go ahead and, that's right, come play City of Heroes. You blam truckers. As a stone tank, you're a lot more powerful now, so you can actually handle a lot of enemies at once, and they have a lot more control power, so they can lock down those enemies. In EverQuest, your enchanter or bard, mostly enchanters, are going to be locking down the enemies, and if you attack one of the enemies, they're no longer asleep. They're just sleeping them. It's what we call a mez, because of the term in EverQuest is mesmerize. So you've
Yep.
got them mesmerized down. So you might pull 4 enemies in, and they'll sit, and the controller will then go to town and be like, pause him, pause him, pause him, kill that one. And so the other 5 members of the group go to kill that one, and the controller's sitting there going, I gotta meditate and get my mana back up in case one of these guys breaks mez, so I gotta keep my mana up so I can keep these guys locked down. And you'll also probably be running a pet at the same time. A charmed pet, another mob that they keep locked down as a charm to use for their DPS. That's what pulling looks like in EverQuest. Pulling in City of
EverQuest
Heroes,
Classic, at least.
EverQuest Classic, yes, not in modern EverQuest necessarily. In City of Heroes, pulling looks more like this. There's a bunch of guys over there. I'm going to go run into them and hope they all start attacking me, and hope the rest of my group isn't dumb enough to start attacking them before I actually get them all aggroed on me. Tanks pull almost exclusively in City of Heroes. Tanks pull rarely in EverQuest. You usually have a different class doing the pulling than the tank, because except for Shadow Knights and Rangers, tanks don't have great pulling skills.
It's funny, actually, a lot of times in my groups, even when maybe not Classic, but I started playing with them in Velius, or right after Velius.
All right.
Our Enchanter pulled all the time.
Enchanters actually make very good pullers if they've got decent pet control.
Well, he doesn't. A lot of times he didn't use the pet, or he would
in that case, he'd make a great controller. I mean, puller.
If multiple ones came, then he would charm one of the. If one of them broke Mez, then he would charm the one that broke Mez and use that to attack. And since that would have its life lowered down, we'd pull in another one and we'd use that to whatever. So yeah,
that's a pulling technique in EverQuest. You don't talk very much about pulling in City of Heroes or in most modern MMOs because you just zerg everything. Now, we've talked about pulling here on the channel before in City of Heroes and what that looks like. So I don't really want to go into too much detail there, but if you want a smoother ride in a game like City of Heroes, you plan out your attacks. You don't just zerg forward. But there's so much margin of error in how much damage you can mitigate and how much damage you can do in games like City of Heroes and games like World of Warcraft and the mobs are set up in small enough groups, which is ironic because they're gigantic groups in City of Heroes, but in small enough groups that your group can handle them. That you can just zerg in, attack, and usually everybody's is fine. In EverQuest, that is not the case. It is a very different game.
And one of the other big differences, and the reason why it doesn't matter as much, is because in City of Heroes, dying isn't a big deal. It's
not really, no.
While you might lose experience, it's not much. You don't really lose experience. Well, you kind of lose experience.
You gain debt.
Yeah, you gain debt.
So while you have debt in City of Heroes, you gain experience at half your normal rate.
But with the other thing is, when City of Heroes, even if you have a lot of debt, you're fine. You're not really de-leveling. And also, there's this whole thing of rezzing is self-rezzing specifically, and we've talked about this before, is easy.
Oh, yeah.
It's quick. You can buy a bunch of them. Whereas in EverQuest,
buy a bunch of wakies and put them in your mailbox.
Someone has to res you. And 99% of the time,
Oh yeah.
Unless like someone has a token of resurrection which they paid real money for, whether they got it in a pack or they bought it on its own, they still paid real money for.
Yep.
You're only going to be rezzed by the healer, or in
Yeah.
some cases, a necromancer. But that means that they're focusing on rezzing you as opposed to healing the group or possibly the tank, which means you're probably not going to get res. They're going to see how far they can go. And unless things stabilize in the fight and they don't really need you, the funny thing is you're only going to get rezzed if they don't need you. If they really need you, they can't afford to res you because they're
Takes too
trying to
much
keep
time.
everybody else alive. Yep.
Yeah. So in EverQuest, you don't get rezzed until the fight's over. When you die, you're out of the fight, and you've lost experience. It's a harder game, and
Yep.
it takes a lot more coordination, a lot more work. It's the
And even
reason I
if
love EverQuest and the reason
yep.
I hate EverQuest.
And even if you get rezzed, you're at low life, you're at like no mana if you are a casting type class. Yeah.
Yeah.
It just sucks.
But it's awesome too. Like
Oh yeah.
the challenge is part of what makes the game fun, just like any game. If you're good at something and it's something hard that you're good at, doesn't matter whether it's playing a video game or making something with your hands, some kind of craft skill, um, whatever it is in life, if it's the harder it is, if you're good at the hardest versions of it, you're proud of yourself, as you should be. There's honor in that. And EverQuest is a hard game. It is a very hard game. It's the hardest MMO out. It may not be the hardest, I don't know, but it's the hardest one I play. And we wanted to talk specifically about pulling techniques. We've gone over what it looks like in City of Heroes, so I want to tell you a little bit about what it looks like in EverQuest. One, you need to have some kind of a ranged attack. Because of the way aggro works with the mobs, the bad guys, a ranged attack will only aggro. There's two different kinds of aggro. There's direct attack aggro and there's friend aggro. So if the mob gets attacked itself, it has more aggro than the friends around it who see it get attacked. They're also going to aggro, get the hate list, the aggro list, whatever you want to call it. They're still going to hate the player character and come after him. So what you do as a puller is you get close enough, you get within range to use your ranged weapon. As a monk, you're going to want to buy spears because spears have the longest range in Classic. They're a little heavier, but you want that range. If not spears, then throwing axes. People who use shuriken and throw and just that throw rock skill, that's great for you, but for difficult pulls, you're at a huge disadvantage. So then once now rangers and tanks and shadow knights and everyone else, they all have different range attacks. If they have a bow, they can attack with a bow. If you're a bard and you're pulling, you can attack with one of your songs, or you can grab spears. And you have throwing weapons available to you. If you're an enchanter, and you're pulling, you're going to pull with one of your what do you call it? Spells, damage spells. Yeah, you can also in EverQuest, you can lower the aggro radius of the mobs with different spells.
Harmony.
So that's right. Druids and rangers get harmony. Pacify is the spell line for clerics and paladins and enchanters, and it just lowers their aggro radius. So if you have 3 mobs, and I have 3 Lego figures here, give me a second. So if you got 3 guys standing around, and you only want to pull one of them, you pacify these 2 Mandalorians over here, and you pull Luna Love. What is her name from?
Luna Lovegood?
Is it Lovegood?
Are you talking about from Harry
Yeah,
Potter?
it's Luna Lovegood from Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And then I got 2 Death Watch Mandos here. This is what I happen to have sitting on my computer. So anyway, because we are geeks, we're not kidding, we're geeks. So if you wanted to pull her and you had a pacify power, you'd cast pacify on these 2, hope it takes, and then attack her. You attack her and only she comes. If you don't have that, like a monk, why do we have Baby Yoda up?
He's the one casting Pacify.
Okay. So if Baby Yoda doesn't have pacify, what he's going to do, as like, say it's a monk. Monks get feigned death, which Shadow Knights and Necromancers also get. So what you do in that case is you hit Luna with the ranged attack. She starts running. They see her running. They start running too. And then when they get close enough, you turn around and you run back to your group. Your group is all camped out, hanging out all by themselves. All the other 5 people are there waiting for you to come back with some mobs. When you want to drop, you want to actually do your feigned death when you're in when you're in range of the tank to hit it with an arrow, but you're far enough out that you're not actually in aggro range. Because what'll happen is these guys will be coming running back to the group. You drop, and they'll stand around, and then these two will walk away first, and the one you hit will walk away last. And as it's starting to walk away, or after these guys get out of aggro range, the tank hits this one with an arrow and draws it in. And that's classic pulling in EverQuest. If you've got an enchanter in the group, then you can just go grab 3 or 4 mobs, and the same way you hit them and you just run back. You don't need, if you're with a good enchanter, you don't need to worry that much about pulling, or as much about pulling, unless you've got like a big group of like 5 or 6 mobs. Then you type into the group and say, hey, big pull, I'm going to split it. And hopefully they know what they're doing. Almost everybody in EverQuest knows what they're doing, because nobody wants to lose experience, because it's a pain to get experience in EverQuest. So then when they come into if you're just bringing 3 mobs, it's cake for the enchanter to mez 2 of them and kill the highest level one. Then kill the healer. Because if you've got one that's too high level for the enchanter to mez, everybody focuses on that one mob. So in this case, it's Luna with her magic. Everybody focuses on Luna with her magic, and once they get back to the group, we go ahead and we put Tweedledee and Tweedledum here from Deathwatch on pause. They mesmerize them. So you take her out. Once she goes down, you pick another one. The enchanter keeps. So you take 2 guns here, and you start attacking 2 guns, and no guns goes back on pause when 2 guns goes down. Then you finally get around to killing no guns. And by the time he's at about half health, if you're a good puller, you start running back into the castle or wherever you're, the Kentucky Fried Chicken down in South Carolina or wherever you're pulling from, and you start getting more mobs. They have bird people in this game, and we call the biggest settlement of bird people in the main continent Kentucky Fried Chicken.
I've never heard it called that before, but that is awesome.
Have you been hunting there before?
I normally don't
during
go to
Classic.
Corona. I mean, I did back in the day, but I don't remember it called that.
Oh, our buddy, what's his name there? Sticky Fingers.
Oh, okay, yeah.
He's the one who introduced me to, the Karanas and the birdhouse in particular, the aviacs, and he's the one who called it KFC. And
I'm vaguely remembering it, but he's the one who brought me there, and that's where I found one of the guilds that I was in back in Classic.
Classic, not TLPs.
Right. Yeah.
We actually, if you'll still see it today when people are running around KFC and they'll say camp check or just CC, because you actually camp in EverQuest. You don't camp in other MMOs. So they'll say camp check, and they'll tell you what spawns are being currently camped. Because when you camp a spawn, you just sit there with your group and pull them into the spawn. You don't do camps in City of Heroes. City of Heroes was the first MMO to have instances, really. Instanced dungeons is what they called them at the time, or missions, instanced missions. And now everybody's doing it, including EverQuest, kind of. And not nearly as much in EverQuest, but it is what it is. So.
Well, I mean, for the most part, yeah. EverQuest still has open areas, but they also do still have instant stuff, especially for raids now. Because back in the day, raids, literally, only a couple of guilds could really do endgame content because you had to wait for it to respawn because it was open world. nowadays everybody can have access to it and do it because, well, it's inside of its own instance, so you don't have to hope that you can be on the schedule so that next week you have a chance at the big red dragon.
Yeah.
Unless you're on P99. Anyways.
Yeah. And the Lost Dungeons of Norath, which is close to classic.
Yep. That's when they started doing some of that stuff, yeah.
Yeah. That's the first instance dungeons in EverQuest was Lost Dungeons of Norath, which was a lot of fun.
But now, for those of you who might be interested in trying out EverQuest, if you go on a TLP, every TLP has instanced versions of the raid areas, of which you can also do. You don't have to necessarily have a raid to go in there, but if you're going to be hitting the higher content, you probably want to.
Yeah. This last year was the first year where I just went up to Hate and hoped to get a group once I got into Hate. The Plane of Hate. And
yes.
we just go hang out and Hate and, just kill stuff. And people have been doing it for years. I'm such an alcoholic in that game because I love you can't do everything. That's the other side of it to EverQuest is you can't do everything. You can only do generally 1 to 2 things well. And that drives me up the wall. So I like to make a bunch of different characters and try everything out. And I only do it once a year. This year, I'm not sure if I play. I'm going to actually try and stick to this whole one character thing. I don't know if that's possible.
I was going to say, I would pay money to see that.
Really? How much?
We'll talk.
Money's a motivator for me. Winning bets is a motivator for me. Because I can do it if there's money on the line. I almost did it this year, except... So what happened this year is I made a monk.
The rule set did it to you this year. Sorry, go ahead.
That was part of it. But I made a monk because I'd never leveled a monk. Like, it wasn't... I'm like, I'm going to play this monk, and I'm only going to play this monk, and I'm going to love it. I've enjoyed playing a monk, and I do enjoy playing a monk. But it turns out I really don't like pulling all the time. I like pulling. I don't like pulling all the time. And monks pull all the time. So when I got a break from pulling, it was awesome. And then running into people who didn't know how to pull, and I had to teach them, or how to interact while I was pulling, and I had to teach them through text, because, random people in a pub you can't talk to via Discord unless you invite them to your Discord server, and that's a whole nother thing, or vice versa. So, and I can't always talk on Discord when I'm playing anyway. And so I have to teach them how to deal with splitting a spawn and all that stuff, and people are like, oh, we can't go until we get an enchanter here. And I'm like, listen, I'm good enough puller. We can go. If the tank can handle this, if I just need a tank or an enchanter, preferably a tank. And they're like, you don't know what you're doing. And then we kick butt for hours on end.
Yeah, you don't always need an enchanter. I mean, in some areas, it might be a very, very good thing, but...
There are some areas you do need an enchanter.
Well, yeah, I'll give you that. But sometimes you can even just replace someone with root for an enchanter, depending upon what you're fighting. If you're fighting something that doesn't have casting or range, you're good. Because you can just plop them.
Park them with a root. An immobilization technique. Yeah. Everybody who has root as a spell should always have root memorized, because you never know when you're going to need it. So... Anybody out there in Blam Blam Truckerland who happens to know anyone over at the WB who could listen to a good pitch, I would love to pitch a movie to you for the DC universe, for the movie universe, and have them give us a text here in the YouTube channel. Or we have an email address yet?
I haven't set it up, but you can.
I'll get one set up this week. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. That's right, Instagram. We have one post over there. It is still only one, right?
No, I'm up to 5.
Oh, 5 posts on Instagram. So yeah, contact us through Facebook or YouTube, and we will have an email address up by the end of the week. Well, not this week, next week. It is the end of the week right now while we're recording. So by the time this video comes out, we should have an email address.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
All right.
All right.
Keep on trucking, you blam blam truckers.
See you, truckers.